Hello and welcome to WDSE's Forum in the Northland with the candidates running for Minnesota State Senate District 3. I'm Heidi Holtan. I'm News Director at KEXE, a national public radio affiliate in northern Minnesota. Senate District 3 is the largest in the state. It covers a large portion of the Arrowhead region in northeastern Minnesota. The district includes all of Lake, Cook, and Koochiching counties, northern Itasca County, and the northern and eastern portion of St. Louis County. Candidates running for office in this district have many miles to cover to reach the voters. Tonight, we're going to find out more about the candidates in a one-hour forum. We want to welcome Republican candidate Andrea Zupancich and the current mayor of Babbitt and Democratic Farmer Labor Party candidate Grant Hauschild, a Hermantown City Councilor. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. So tonight's forum is going to be a conversation. It's not a strictly timed debate. I'll make sure that you each have ample time to answer each question. We may have some follow-ups, and we'll be giving the candidates an opportunity first to introduce themselves. And we'll start with you, Ms. Zupancich.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for hosting this forum tonight. I appreciate this opportunity. I'm really excited about this forum, the opportunity, what I've experienced already. It's just been amazing. I'm the current mayor of Babbitt, have been here for 8 years. Prior to that, I was on council for 2 years. I'm the mother of 4, a new grandmother. I'm a small business owner. My husband has been a long-standing, he's 4th generation of his family's business, long-standing in the district, grocery stores, and just really have a concern and a love and a passion for our district. So I'm really excited about this opportunity. So thank you.
Mr. Hauschild.
Yeah, thank you so much, Heidi and WDSE, for hosting this debate. I'm Grant Hauschild, and I'm thrilled to be running for this State Senate District 3. I'm a father and husband. I have a 2-year-old and a 9-month-old, and when this seat came open, they were really my inspiration for running. I want to leave Minnesota better off for our kids than we have it now. I'm a local city councilor. I raise money for patients and families that can't afford the care that they need all across the Arrowhead, including opening a Ronald McDonald House of the Northland, which serves kids all over our region. And I've worked in the U.S. Senate and in the U.S. Department of Agriculture on rural economic development policy and labor policy. I'm really passionate about those issues and fighting for our rural communities because we have a lot that we can be proud of. You know, when this seat opened up, I got a lot of calls from a lot of folks looking for somebody that had the experience to step up and serve in this role. And that's really why I'm running, because I think the Northland needs to continue to have an independent voice that can stand up and fight for our fair share in St. Paul and make sure that we get what we deserve for our miners, for our schools, for our healthcare services in our region. And there's a lot of issues. So I'm looking forward to having this debate, and just thank you so much for the opportunity.
Well, and we'll take turns on who answers the questions first. And so you both already talked about that you have been serving your communities in local government. Grant, I think we'll start with you as city councilor in Hermantown. What is something that you have learned in that position that maybe you didn't expect? Or
yeah, you know, Ms. Zupancich and I were actually just talking about this earlier before the start of this debate. People care most about what's right in front of them, the issues that matter right outside their door and in their local community. So I think that's really what I've learned most when people are dealing with childcare issues and the lack of childcare in their local community. When there's a road project and they're facing increased property taxes because of a lack of state funding, you know, that becomes a big issue. And that's really another reason why I chose to run, because I've seen what it takes to, you know, work with somebody like Senator Tom Bach to request bonding for my local community in Hermantown. We had an amendment ready for $4 million for my community for a recreation facility, and unfortunately the legislature fell apart and didn't pass the deal. And that's frustrating to me as a local city councilor fighting for my community. And that's really, you know, again, why I'm excited to run for this office, because I think we need a senator that understands local, state, and federal policy like I do.
We will get back to bonding later in the evening. So, Andrea, for you, what have you learned? You've been both city councilor and mayor now.
Yeah, I've been altogether on council for 10 years, council for 2 years, and then mayor for 8 years. And it's been an exciting journey, to say the least. I've been asked to speak at a roundtable with the Obama administration as well as with the Trump administration, which was very flattering because I truly was able to say how our region and our town feels. And we feel it it's not necessarily just a matter of just a mining company or mining jobs. It's the whole community. It's affected within the community, outside the community, and regionally. And it's a trickle-down effect that we all feel. And that's been really enlightening, as well as really just encouraging to me to hear that this is what the people really want. And I love having that opportunity, especially when I was subbing at the school while I opened up my business, and just hearing the kids just saying, these are children that you're in school with. What do you want to do with the rest of your life? And they're telling you, we want to stay here, but there aren't jobs here for us to be able to grow and support our family. We don't want to have 2 or 3 jobs. And I know so many people in the area, if not the region, have 2 or 3 jobs just to be able to sustain their way of life. So many resorters, loggers, they're making hay while the sun shines, and then they're spending the rest of the time doing what they can to get by. And that's what's encouraging, is to see all the job opportunities we have, because I truly believe we live in the prettiest area. As I've been driving around throughout the district, I have been the entire time I've been a realtor, as well as with my hockey, with my son being in hockey. It's an amazing district, but now I see it through a different light, and I can really just appreciate more so, and I just feel we have so much to offer. And going to all the different areas, I really have been finding out what every town wants and needs, and you'd be surprised to hear it. Like in the Cook area, well, generally in the Northern District, we need large animal vets, we need dentists, we need just the basics, and that's something that you don't really think about. So it's really interesting to hear that. So I've been just formulating my lists.
Yeah, we'll get to mining and jobs throughout the night. We're going to start now with, we heard from a listener of KEXC today. She had a question she wanted me to pose to both of you. It's Kathleen from Cook. And we will start first with you, Andrea. She says, what are the positions on water conservation, water quality protection, and water wildlife and rice management, et cetera? She said, the mining and the water issues are intimately intertwined, but the discussions often emphasize the importance of mining as if it supersedes the essential human requirement of clean water. So we'll talk about mining from a lot of different perspectives, but
sure.
Yeah.
Oh, well, 100%. I do not want to be an advocate of bad water for our areas. We live there. I personally feel Babbitt has the best water. If it's not going to be safe, I don't want to do it. So we need to just ensure that we can do both. I feel the water quality has been, for us in our area, at where it should be, if not better. And so it's very important that we follow those criteria, because water is essential to life. So that's nothing that we can take for granted, and we need to stay on top of that. So I agree with that.
Grant, for you, water quality?
I mean, water is critical. It's really the lifeblood of northern Minnesota. We're one of the most visited places in the country here in District 3. You think about Minnesota and what we're known for. Without District 3, Minnesota wouldn't have a lot to chirp about. And I think it's a lot to do with our lakes. It's a lot to do with the boundary waters. It's a lot to do with what's going on in Cook County and Grand Marais and all those beautiful places, some of my favorite places in Minnesota. We need to make sure that we have objective processes in place that trust the regulators that evaluate projects to make sure that we're keeping our water clean. We have to be able to do both, protect our environment, keep our water clean, and create jobs, and preferably union jobs, which is what I've been an advocate for. We can't let politics taint this process, because if it does, then no one's going to trust it and no one's going to rely on that. And so I will always be a strong advocate for protecting our environment, and I think my credentials and my background back that up.
A quick follow-up for you on that, and I'll get to you too as well, Andrea. When it comes to copper nickel mining, there's been some really kind of exciting ideas out there about some inventions on how to keep the water clean, because in other places where copper nickel has been, it's contaminated water, and it's kind of left that even after the industry is done. It's not quite there yet, but what do you know so far? How have you found information on this? Kind of give us a little background.
Yeah, well, I've certainly done the tours of the two different projects, talked to the experts involved in those projects. I've also talked to environmentalists and folks that are concerned about these projects, making sure that I'm, hearing all sides of this issue. I think that's another critical part of this debate, is that we need a senator that's not going to just be one-sided. We need a senator that's going to listen to all parties and hear and listen. With the Twin Metals project, we know that there's dry stack plans in place that could, handle that danger more seriously or in a better way. Electric vehicles, I know that's not exactly to your question, but I think that's a really interesting idea that they've come up with there. I'm interested in digging in more and learning more, but this is something that I've hit the ground on right away from day one.
Andrea, how about for you in terms of some of the inventions that they're working on right now for water quality?
So what's amazing for St. Louis County is we have some of the cleanest water in the state. We also have some of the newest water, and we also have some of the strictest water standards, which goes hand in hand with the cleanest water we have. So that talks volumes for what we do with our standards up north already. So in regards to the mining, there are standards in place. Minnesota has some of the strictest standards. And if we're able to prove it, we should be able to do it, correct? So if you're able to do it, then if you're able to prove it, you should be able to do it. So I have full confidence that they are able to prove that they're able to do that. We're leading technology in it, as opposed to foreign entities that are mining that have no standards, no safety practices in place, and that's what we need to stay away from, because it's okay somewhere else does not mean it's going to be okay in our area, because it's a global environment. It's not just a local environment, and that's what we need to focus on, which is why we have some of the best water in St. Louis County that we do in any other counties in the state.
I'm going to do one more follow-up for both of you, but when it comes to regulations, they're not always met by mining companies. We certainly have the cleanest water, but not necessarily where the mining is taking place. How do you make sure that the companies that own these mining companies actually follow the regulation?
Okay, sure, I can understand that. Well, so picture a speeding train as it's like barreling down the tracks, right? You can't necessarily just stop it and reel it back in and then get it chugging up and going in. It's a process. So they're barreling down. You need to be able to pull them back. And so I think appropriate measures need to be taken, that these standards be given, and then they have X amount of time, because they're going full force. And it's hard to pull that back right away. And for no fault of anyone, it's just that's where it was, and that's where it was a couple years ago, and then now all of a sudden this is today, but yet here we're here. So I think we need to step back, look what's reasonable, and make sure that we can work with them to pull it all back, because no one wants to poison anyone's environment. No one absolutely wants to do that, and I'm not an advocate of that either. So we want to make sure it's safe for everyone around here. We don't want anything bad going on at any cost.
Grant, for you, in terms of regulations and keeping companies to them?
Yeah, I mean, I would hope that we don't have a train barreling down a track that is uncontrollable and that we can't pull back. I think we need to have some circuit breakers that make sure that certain regulations are being met. We need the mine plan to be evaluated by our state regulators so that we know when certain things aren't happening, that as a senator we can have hearings, call in those folks involved in the project and hear and look at the evidence directly so that we're properly evaluating those. In addition to that, we need to make sure that there's money set aside by the mining companies should there be any issues to provide those funding so that it's not on the state taxpayers. That's a huge issue for me, and I want to make sure that we're protecting the taxpayers and making sure that these regulations are being met. So we can use some preemptive strategies like that, but then we can also have some sticks. I think we need to make sure that if these standards after the mine plan is evaluated aren't met, then there should be some fines. There should be some clear and objective things in place that make sure that these are being met.
So let's kind of flip the coin then in terms of copper nickel mining, which we have never had before, but is a potential out there. What are you looking for, Grant, for you first? What are you optimistic about in terms of a possible new mining strategy?
That's a very good question. So in terms of these two projects, what is the...
Yeah, and in terms of jobs, what it can mean to the region.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, number one, I think that we need to make sure that we have these union jobs created at these projects. I would love to see those agreements in place because we know that when we have strong union jobs, everyone benefits from higher wages, whether they're union or non-union. So that would be, one of the things that I look most forward to. We also know that we're looking forward to a green economy. We want Minnesota to be leaders in that. So looking forward to signing contracts with electric vehicle companies, with solar, wind, all of these things that are happening and coming down the pike. I think we need to make sure that Minnesota is a part of those conversations, but not just a part of them, leading in those areas.
Andreas, for you, copper nickel mining, what are your thoughts for the potential for the region?
I think the potential for the region is huge. There is so much out there. We have some of the cleanest and the largest deposits in the nation, and we can do it right. So regardless of who the ownership is, they still have to abide by Minnesota's standards. So that means they have to have not only the money set aside in a trust account that they can't touch to build the facility. If there's anything that happens detrimental, they have to have that money set aside. They also have to have reclamation set aside. They need to have all those funds set aside before they can even break ground. So those are huge amounts of money that company needs to have in a trust account. Not a promise note. We need to have this money there. They have made so many strides as far as just the environmental aspects go. I know Twin Metals is planning on busing the workers into the site. They've already signed union contracts with that, just so they can lessen the blow to the environment by busing the employees in. Polymet is already working on an existing mine site and cleaning that up as well. So they're already fixing what was done wrong. And I think it's amazing for the dedication that the companies both have shown over the years, and they are dedicated and proving that they can clean these sites up and do it very safely.
Well, let's talk a little bit. We talked at the beginning about how large of a geographic area that this Senate District 3 is. I think the Boys Fort Band is within this region. Could you talk a little bit about what that has been like, what your relationship is like with the band, and what you see it if you are elected?
Okay, well, the band is actually divided up in two areas. So there's the Tower Reservation, and then there's one by Net Lake. I have met with them a few times. I was actually the pre-opening manager of Fortune Bay back a million years ago when I came up here. So it's been really interesting just to even reconnect with people again. So I know they are heavily invested in their traditions, which is amazing, their concerns for their people, their wants for their people, their wants for the land. And it's refreshing for me just because to hear what they all want, just to affirm it all, and the hardships that they've gone through. So I can relate with that, and just to be a listening and sounding board for them is fantastic, because those are things that you don't necessarily hear all the time, but as a senator, you're going to have that in the back of your mind, and you're always going to remember that and bring it to the forefront when it comes to the district.
Grant, how about for you in Boys Fort?
Yeah, Boys Fort and Grand Portage. We have two tribal nations in our district, both critically important. They were here before us. We need to recognize that. Chairwoman Kathy Chavers is a supporter of mine. I've attended a powwow with her. I've gone to the council and seen many of them sworn in. I've listened and talked with many of the tribal members, not just the council. We need to have a senator that's going to do those things, that's going to participate in their ceremonies, that's going to visit with them directly and hear their concerns. I used to work for U.S. Senator Heidi Holtan, a leader in tribal relations and tribal policy. So I've attended countless powwows, countless tribal meetings. So I'm very experienced in those relationships, and I think I'm somebody that our tribal nations can trust. And so I look forward to forming those relationships with them as we move forward as well.
So just a quick follow-up for both of you, but in terms of the Boys Fort Band and water quality and sulfates and wild rice is sacred to their traditions, will they have a seat at the table when it comes to kind of developing the new mining on the Iron Range?
Oh, I would absolutely, in fact, not just encourage, but require that. I mean, we can't move forward with these things and not include our tribal leadership in these conversations and in these proceedings. Absolutely.
Yeah. Same question for you.
Yeah, no, exactly. You can't. That's one of their traditions. That's one of their way of life. That's Boys Fort's one of their entities of how they make money. Absolutely, they need that, and so that should be taken into consideration 100%.
Well, we'll move on. We'll still talk mining, though. I think a lot of our questions will be about mining tonight. But mining is a big part of the workforce, of course, of Senate District 3. But let's talk a little bit about other industries that you would support as a Minnesota State Senator. Are there new jobs that give you hope for diversifying the region? And I think it's your turn, Grant.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I've actually talked to quite a few business owners and entrepreneurs and folks involved in industry, and I think there's a lot on the horizon that could diversify our economy. A lot of those are tied up in private conversations, but I've started to hear even about that just throughout this campaign. I think this is where the IRRB is really, really critical. We know that this senator has a seat at that table, and we need to make sure that the IRRB is investing in new technologies, diversifying our economy. I'd also like to see us invest in more small businesses, entrepreneurs, folks that maybe are creating 5, 6, 7 jobs, not just the hundreds and hundreds of jobs in big industry. We also know the project, not in our district, but further out west in logging. I think that's something that we definitely want to continue to look into. And then back to our green economy. I think that's a really, really critical piece that Minnesota needs to lead on. I would look forward for opportunities for manufacturing in the green space for solar and wind. We know there's the project that Senator Tomasoni worked on in solar. That's a really exciting project. And then lastly, I work in healthcare. And we know, we talk a lot about mining, we talk a lot about these other industries. Healthcare is the biggest employer in our region. And that's a big deal. These folks go to work every day. My wife is a frontline healthcare worker. They're sacrificing every day to care for our families in the Northland. And we need to make sure that we're fighting for the steel workers in our healthcare facilities, our MNA nurses who have endorsed me, both the steel workers and MNA have endorsed me, and those are high quality paying jobs, and we need to make sure that we're standing up for them as well.
Andrea, for you, in terms of new jobs that might give you hope for diversifying the range as well.
Right. Well, I feel that we need healthcare for everyone, whether they're high-paying jobs or no-paying jobs. Everyone should be entitled to that healthcare. And, the jobs that come along, there's so many opportunities up here. As I mentioned before, we need large animal vets. We need dentists. We need the mining jobs. We need sustainable jobs. My previous background is hospitality, and tourism is a great opportunity for employers, but it's also very cyclical, very seasonal, very fad-driven, and it's great for students and, like the owners of the companies, 100%, no issues there. But we need to be able to think outside the box and what else can we do up here? And one of the issues that we have that kind of hedges us back a little bit is like if we have a manufacturing plant up in, let's say, International Falls or Kuchiching, how are they going to get their product out? Well, there's no waterway nearby, there's no railway nearby. How are they going to get it? Well, they have to truck it out, which is one of the higher costs. So we need to figure and streamline that stuff out. So many railroads have been taken out of the whole entire district. And we need to figure out what's going to work best for the area now that we've got better broadband, which is fantastic. So we can maybe open it up to more call centers up here, because why would you not want to live up here, choose where you want to live instead of having to work where you have to work. So, I think there's lots of opportunities and we've got lots of spaces up here. So I think there's lots on the horizon for us.
The largest railway port is in International Falls. So that's, I think, a key, part of this that really helps in that factor.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the Minnesota Legislature. You are both running for the seat that was held by Tom Bach for quite a long time. Everyday citizens don't often grasp what goes on at the Capitol in St. Paul. So I'm sort of curious from you, what do you know about the legislative process? What are you looking forward to if you are elected?
Well, if I'm elected, it will be an amazing opportunity for me. Tom Bach actually recruited me for this position. He's endorsed me for this, and he has said multiple times that I represent the people of the district. I know what they want and how they feel, which is a very big compliment. And so I want to represent them to the full force and bring forth policy and jobs and healthcare and everything that they need to the area, make sure that we're not left behind.
Grant, for you, in terms of what the legislative process will be like, what you think your role will be if you're elected to this?
Yeah, I mean, I think this seat, in a sense, is pretty symbolic. In addition to being a powerful seat for the entire state. We've always had Titans in the Northland and on the Iron Range, and really when Tom Bach retired, I was called by labor groups, by independent stakeholders, by municipal leaders, and told, look, nobody is announcing running, and we need somebody that can step into this job and really fill the shoes that Senator Tom Bach is leaving. And, I think given my experience working in the U.S. Senate for the number 50 most moderate U.S. Senator, being at that table, working with Republicans and Democrats on national deals, working in rural economic development most of my life, and now in healthcare and local city council, I think I bring that breadth of experience that would let me hit the ground running on day one and really focus on delivering. One of the things that I hear most on the doors, and something that I feel myself, is that there's just a lot of nonsense on both sides of the aisle, really distracting us from getting anything done. We saw it this last session. There was a deal to provide historic middle-class tax relief. There was funding for Northland schools. There was a bonding bill that Senator Tom Bach was leading the effort, like I said, had funding for not just Hermantown, but communities all across our district. We also had a plan to eliminate the tax on Social Security income. All of that fell apart because of political gridlock and gamesmanship. And so this senator really has to be that independent voice who can work with both sides and try to break through that logjam. That would be my goal. The last thing we need is a senator that's going to get in the back of their party's line and wait for directions. And that's the last thing that I'll be.
In terms of it's as politicians running for the seat, both of you, whoever is elected, then suddenly you work for everybody in the district. It's not about campaigning anymore. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you will make that change, how you will weigh which, if people are coming to you about bills that they want passed, how you will handle that switch. Okay.
Well, thanks. So I'm a realtor, and I'm used to working with both sides of a transaction. So that kind of equates to, Democrats and Republicans. I like to think that I'm able to reach that point and make that connection to make everyone happy. So that's essentially how I plan on taking it on. Not everyone can have it one way or the other, and we need to find that happy medium to be able to go forward. And you need to realize that, and you need to be able to express that to the people, saying, all right, well, this is what we need to do. So I'm really looking forward to that on a broader scope of bringing people together and just making it go forward. So it's a win-win for everyone, and that's been my goal. That's been my goal for 19 years. So,
Grant, I think you've kind of answered this.
Yeah.
But if you want to speak more to how you change your role if you are elected.
Sure. Well, I gave the example in the U.S. Senate working for Senator Heidi Holtan, being at that table. The second thing that I've done is on city council, I have been able to work with, a city councilor in Hermantown that's a Republican, a police chief in Hermantown that maybe has some political differences with me. But we've come together and fought for really important things at the local level, like a paved trail at no additional cost to our residents, expanding broadband to 230 homes through state funding through the broadband program. We've been fighting for a recreation initiative, trying to get that bonding money I talked about that I'm so frustrated got held up in the last legislative session. So, I think I've shown through my actions over and over again that I'm able to work with all sides to make sure that we're focusing on the issues that really, really matter. And that's really what we need.
As it stands right now, Minnesota is the only state in the nation that has a divided state legislature until we have this election where it could change. It's often bragged about that Minnesotans want the parties to be working together, and that's why it ends up this way. But we also saw tons of gridlock. We've already talked about that, like what happened at the end of last session with no bonding bill. You're going to have to jump into a system that's already there. You can't necessarily just change it like that. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about how you see going into this, knowing the last session was left in a very difficult state.
Right. Well, you know, it's never easy to just jump in and try and fix something that's already been, you know, started, broken, whatever it may be. And so I like to think I've been faced with many challenges in my life, many. From my twins being born early to opening up my own business to hitting a market crash to, you know, where I am right now. So you have to be able to be flexible. You have to be able to look at the whole picture, and you have to be able to think with a straight mind. You can't, so like I'm not a typical politician. I'm not a career politician. This isn't, you know, what I had wanted to do my entire life, but I feel I have the skills that it takes to be able to pull things together, be able to come up with a solution, look at the bigger picture, and make it go forward from there.
Grant, if you're elected as the new voice, how do you jump into the gridlock that was left?
Yeah, it's about forming relationships. The first thing that I would do as a state senator is meet with every senator in the chamber, Republican, Democrat, if there's an independence there, who knows, and really find out where it is that we have commonalities, what in our background relates to one another. And then I'd like to hear what important projects matter in other regions, because we know that in negotiations, it's not just coming to the middle and solving a problem, it's making sure that all sides get something. And so I would want to make sure that I'm on the tax committee, that I'm on the capital investment committee. Those are two powerful committees that Senator Bach has served on that have given him a lot of leverage to deliver not just for the Northland, but making sure that he's sort of making those deals on bonding projects and other things that support the entire state. So I look forward to those relationships, and it's going to be fun.
One of the things our viewers and listeners have questions about has to do with Roe versus Wade. It was overturned by the Supreme Court this year, leaving it up to the states to decide. So Grant, for you first, how would you approach a woman's reproductive rights if you are elected to Senate District 3?
Yeah, all of these legislators in Minnesota have no place getting between women and their doctors. We don't want politicians making these decisions. We want women and families making these decisions. And I think that's why I'm so disappointed, and I think most Americans and most Minnesotans are disappointed by this drastic change in precedent that happened with the U.S. Supreme Court. This is, I think, a key difference between my opponent and I. My opponent has flyers that say 100% pro-life, no exceptions for rape, incest, life of the mother. Those are serious issues. I have a daughter now, and I said at the beginning of this that really part of the reason that I got into this race was because I'm focused on their future. I can't imagine a circumstance where my daughter is in a situation of rape or some other terrible circumstance being forced by the government to go to term with that. And so I think this is a really, really critical issue. Minnesota could be the last state in the Midwest that makes sure that we're not intruding on women's reproductive freedom, and I will be a senator that champions that.
Andrea, you have a chance to respond to what Grant has said and abortion.
Thank you. So that being said, I personally do not have any flyers out there saying I'm against that 100%. That I believe is my opponent's party's mail against me saying that I'm against that. 70% of all Minnesotans prefer or want some sort of term limitations on abortion. So my twins were born at 26 weeks pregnant, and I saw them literally develop outside me. And personally, I am against, choice. But that being said, it's not on the ballot. It is not on the docket to be changed. The only people that can change it are the citizens of Minnesota. So it's really something that is not on the ballot right now, and I have, nothing further to say on that. It's just that it's a tough decision. It's a very tough decision, and there is no easy answer for it.
We know that's not true. We know that there's flyers that were produced by Ms. Zupancich that say 100% pro-life. And this is what's disappointing, because we know that this issue, when it's a campaign slogan for the right wing to tout being 100% pro-life, they use it in a primary, because this was a primary piece that Ms. Zupancich used. Now, when it becomes a liability, all of a sudden the tables turn and the party bosses come out with language that every Senate Republican is using to say that, oh, this isn't on the ballot now. And I think that's disingenuous. I have always had the same position on this, and again, I will fight to make sure that we're keeping the government out of the doctor's office for our women and protect their reproductive freedom.
But you can respond as well.
I would like to know what those flyers are, because I'm not aware of those.
I'll bring them to you.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So, but it is not on the ballot either. So that's where it's going to make the change. And so this isn't an issue right now. There are other issues that I'm hearing at the door, where it's about healthcare, it's about heating, it's about economy, it's about workers. So I want to know, just a minute here. To say that I'm 100% for that, okay. So I think that's wrong.
We'll show the materials. It's a printed piece that was done for your primary. I think if it's not on the ballot, then why do Minnesota Republicans every session introduce legislation to restrict abortion and try to create abortion bans? If it's not on the ballot, then why is it being used on campaign materials? If it's not on the ballot, then why are there statewide candidates saying that it's no secret they want to ban abortion? I think, again, this is a very disingenuous debate. When the script is turned and when it becomes a liability, we hear different language being used by my opponent. My language has never changed. And I will, again, always be a champion on this issue. And it's really important because Minnesota could be, again, the last state standing on this issue in the Midwest.
Do you have any response back?
Well, yeah, I do, because this is something that I'm not hearing at the doors. I'm hearing more pertinent issues. Okay. So that it's not on the docket, as far as I know. I don't know where you're coming up with that, but this is not something that we're going to legislate against. There are other issues that people are more concerned about right now.
Well, let's move on to another hot button, kind of contentious issue. One of the kind of hottest races in the state right now is the Secretary of State race between Steve Simon and Kim Crockett, and they have very different ideas about past elections, how elections should be run in the future. As a candidate for office, you have to rely on the system and trust the system that may or may not elect you to office. So what is your take, and you can go first on this, on the current state of Minnesota's election system?
Well, the current system is you can go in and you can vote. People and voters want to believe that the system is fair and right. And we need to believe that that's exactly what it is, because that is one of the greatest privileges of being an American. My parents came from Germany. My father became a citizen right away when he came over from Germany. He was in the Army. My mother became a citizen, years after that. And that was one of the main privileges that they had, was that they could vote. And it's a very big privilege, and a lot of people don't understand it. I instill it in my children too. It's like, now's your time to make that opportunity, make that change that you want to. And so I encourage everyone to go vote, and we have to believe that the system is fair and just. Don't think that there was corruption going on. Don't let that deter you from voting, because it still needs to carry forward.
Grant, for you on the election system?
Yeah, I think one of the metrics for a strong community is when the citizens feel like they have a voice, when citizens are engaged. We know there's a strong Scandinavian history in Minnesota of civic engagement. It's, you can look at the national models that showcase Minnesota being one of the most volunteering states in the country. Of course, we're the highest election turnout state in the country, multiple elections in a row. These are things that I am so proud of as a Minnesotan, and it's part of the reason that I chose to live here. Language like, well, don't worry about the corruption, you should still, try to vote. I think that's a dangerous precedent for us to start using that type of language, because we know that our elections are secure. We know that audits done in Minnesota have shown that there is not even a morsel of opportunity for an election change due to illegal voting. And it is so great for our communities, for our young people, for everyone to feel like they have their voices heard. And so I will continue to be a strong advocate for ensuring that we have a solid democracy here in Minnesota.
Let's move on. Let's go back to jobs a little bit in your region. Employers are really trying to entice workers right now, but there are issues that they can't control that have been difficult. High cost or lack of daycare, as well as lack of affordable housing. What do you think can be done with these issues, and what are you hearing from people that you're meeting on the campaign trail?
Yeah, like I said, I have a 2-year-old and a 9-month-old, and childcare isn't an exorbitant cost. It's something that impacts every family. I've heard that on the doors. Housing, when especially all across the country and in Minnesota, but I've heard it most impactful up in Cook County. I've heard a story from a local business owner talking about recruiting a worker, getting them to agree to the salary and the deal, and making plans to move up to that region, and then literally not being able to find a house. That is not good for our part of the state. There are people that want to live here. There are people moving from the Twin Cities. There are people that want to live in the most beautiful part of Minnesota. And unfortunately, we're facing huge difficulties with our housing stock. I would look forward to doing better at funding our housing trust fund and making sure that the Northland gets our fair share of those funds to develop housing projects. I think we need to work with our local governments. I know I've been involved in zoning and talking about how do we make sure we're providing housing in our communities. So how do our state legislators be more proactive? How do we start having conversations at the local level to talk about where we can most support our local communities in providing more housing? This is something that I think is really limiting us, and we need to solve this issue in order for us to move forward with some bigger visions that we have for our region.
Andrea, your thoughts on housing and lack of daycare and enticing people to move here?
Right. So that's been a big issue for many years in our area. And so it's kind of along the lines of, if you build it, they will come. So what needs to be built first before they will come? It's a combination of housing and daycare and jobs. You need that all together. We have a new development in our town, and we cannot find a developer that wants to take on that housing project, which is disappointing because it's not only just single family housing, it's also multifamily and twin home housing, which there's a demand for. We've done housing studies on it. We have a demand for daycare, and you'll find all the smaller towns in the district everyone has a demand for daycare. And it's truly hard because we've come across people that have accepted jobs, but again, have not been able to take the jobs because they couldn't find housing and daycare, or one or the other. And in today's economy, when most parents are double working and trying to afford everything that they want for their family, it's very difficult. Being in the real estate industry for all these years, it's been a constant. We need to find some kind of gap funding that bridges that gap between new construction and actual appraisal to be able to get it sold. We've been our town was working with contractors, build a spec home and you can pay for it when the house sells. We only got one taker on that one. So it's really hard to get those people, those incentives. We're trying to get that out there for the smaller areas too, because it's the same not only in the larger areas, but also the smaller areas. It's the same need, but on smaller scales, but there's a need everywhere.
Let's move on to education. That could also be why someone might move to the region, the high standard of education in our state. But schools and teachers, faculty, students, they're struggling right now after the pandemic. How can the legislature support students and staff and the schools in the region?
Well, I was a sub. When I started my business, I was a sub for many years. And one of my favorite stories was when I would sub K through 12, so it was all the children. And it was really enriching and enlightening to see what they all felt from every level of grade for their perspective on how they wanted to live, where they wanted to live. And I would ask the kids from every grade, what do you want to do when you grow up? And obviously the little ones were, school teachers, firemen, all that kind of fun stuff. And then you get to the older seniors and they're like, we don't want to leave this area, but there are no jobs here for us. We don't want to be seasonal workers. We don't want to be, working in the bars and restaurants. That's fine if we're trying to make extra money, but we want something where we can actually sustain a family on. We're not into big towns. We're not into big schools. We're not, we were into the trades. I'm like, that's fantastic. So I think the push from so many years of getting kids to go into 4-year degrees and beyond, I think has now left us with the gap of the trades, and now there's a huge demand for the trades. So that's where I think the education needs to slightly shift. And it was such a big powerhouse to get them to go into 4-year degrees, and now all of a sudden we're left with this gap. And I think it's very important to let them know, you don't have to live in the metro. You can go to trade school, you can be out of school, have no debt, buy a house and have a good job by the time you're 21, 22. And that's amazing. And in fact, I was at a benefit for the Foresman Scholarship a couple weekends ago, and it's been amazing. They've had that benefit going for about, I think, 4 years, and they've had already five students go through the program, jobs, houses, no debt, and they encourage other kids to go through it and award scholarships all the time. So it's amazing to be able to give them that option that there's not just one way, there's other ways.
Grant, how can education be supported in this district?
Yeah, we need to make sure that we're fighting for our teachers, for our schools. We know that our Northland schools are reliant on taconite taxes, so we need to make sure and protect those taxes to make sure that we're getting those additional funds for our schools. I think there's an opportunity for us to do what's happening at Rock Ridge and expand that with more vocational and trade opportunities right there in the high school, so that it's not just post-high school, it's right there as they're learning. I want to make sure that we're providing adequate funding for counseling and special education teachers. We know that there's a huge gap. Our teachers are facing extra pressures because of those gaps, taking on the mental health crisis that is happening in our country. And that's, again, I just have to reiterate, another reason why I'm so frustrated by the last legislative session, because there was $1 billion allocated in that deal that was signed by the Senate Majority Leader, the Speaker of the House, and the Governor, that would have provided that adequate funding for some of those critical programs that would have made sure that we're reaching that Minnesota miracle that we used to be known for here in Minnesota in the 1970s. As a senator, I would look forward to fighting for that funding and making sure that we're reaching those promises that we made as a state.
I want to go back to kind of looking to the future and jobs as well. I want to hear a little bit from both of you about what your position is when it comes to electric vehicles. As a state senator, will you support this industry and the infrastructure that's needed for it?
Yeah, I think this is a great opportunity for us to move forward with a green economy, to give consumers a choice and, buying an electric vehicle, but we need to make sure that if they do make that choice, that we have the infrastructure in place so that they can drive in the Northland. We know that weather and climate is a concern for the electric batteries, so that's something that I think would be really interesting. Could the Northland and could our district be a test case for Tesla, for Ford, making American-made electric vehicles that we could try our best to see what those ranges look like in in winter climates. There are opportunities for us to get additional investments from the federal government that have passed recently with the infrastructure bill. But again, we have to have a legislator that's willing to pass federal matching dollars so that we get our fair share here in Minnesota. Again, I'm disappointed that the legislator failed to even pass simple federal matching dollars, because that means that money goes to places like Wisconsin and Ohio instead of right here in the Northland and in Minnesota.
Andrea, your thoughts on the electric vehicle industry and the future here?
I have a lot of thoughts on my own, and then I've heard a lot of thoughts as well. And I think it's a great idea. I don't think necessarily Minnesota is quite at that stage yet. We've got climate, we've got sun, and we've got different battery capacities. And batteries for the cars are storage units. What is in there to make that energy? How do you get that energy in there? It's fossil fuels, essentially. And so, I think it's a great idea. I don't know if northern Minnesota is exactly the right climate where it can be done. It's definitely something we can try. I don't know if it's something that should be mandated, because we don't have the infrastructure to support it. And I think there's a lot of unknowns right now at this point. And then what happens? You're mandated to make all these changes, and there you sit. So I think some more questions, more conversations need to happen. I think it's a great idea. I just don't think we're quite there yet.
I think we need a senator that's not going to stick their head in the sand and is going to look to the frontier and lead. I really think there's an opportunity for us to make sure that we're providing the subsidies that allow people to afford these vehicles, that encourage union jobs for the production of American-made electric vehicles, that move us toward a cleaner climate and environment by moving forward with electric vehicles. There's so much opportunity here. Again, the Northland could be a leader in testing whether or not cold climates can take on electric vehicles. Why wouldn't we want to be a leader in showing whether or not that's possible? In fact, it might bring additional federal funding or state funding that could go towards our regional economy right here in the Northland. I really think that's a critical piece. Again, we have had titans in these legislative districts in the Northland and on the Iron Range for decades. This is the new frontier. We have to be ready to lead when it comes to diversifying our economy and addressing climate change, and I'll do that as a state senator.
So I have often said we should be the leaders in this industry. I have not said that we should hide our head in the sand. I think there's more information and more processes that need to happen, but absolutely, if we can make this happen, 100%. However, we're not quite there yet. So we need to be able to start it and not necessarily mandate it without having a process in sight.
Well, we are at the end of this, and we're going to give you some time to talk to the viewers directly and about why they should vote for you. And I'm trying to remember whose turn it is, but we'll go with Andrea. Maybe it's Grant first.
You started with me, so I don't know.
Okay, yeah. Grant, you go ahead and go
Great.
first. Yes.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you, WDSE. Thank you, Heidi, for this wonderful debate. I think it was a really great opportunity for us to showcase our ideas and plans for this district. Like I said in the beginning, I have a young son and daughter. My wife and I chose the Northland as our home. We're so thrilled that our kids get to explore and engage and be involved here in our communities in the Northland. And that's really why I got involved and why I'm running, because I want to make sure that we're leaving our state better off than we found it. We have a lot to do because the legislature session, didn't get a lot done for hardworking Minnesotans and those on fixed income. We also didn't get a chance to talk about our North Shore miners who are facing layoffs right now and the idling of their plants, of their processing and mines. So I want to make sure that we're continuing to call for a special session so that we can provide that extended unemployment, which is running out in the coming weeks. I want to make sure that we're eliminating the tax on Social Security income so those on fixed income can stay and retire right here in the Northland in dignity with their loved ones. I want to make sure that we're funding our Northland schools and making sure that we're exploring those ideas to do vocational and trade opportunities with our unions and other laborers. There's so much opportunity ahead of us for us to be leaders, and I look forward to working with all sides. I think what people are most frustrated with is the extreme positions that politicians are taking on both sides of the aisle that are distracting them from getting done what needs to happen. And that's exactly what we elect our senators and representatives to do, to make sure that they're delivering for us. My message all along is that I want to just deliver for the Northland, stay out of the nonsense, and really focus on the bread and butter issues that matter for our region. I hope that I can earn our voters' vote, and I look forward to the next under a month left of this campaign, talking to voters directly about the important issues that matter to them. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Andrea?
Okay, thank you, Heidi and WDSE. This has been really an enlightening and enriching just process the entire time. I'm not a career politician. I have concerns for not only like my family, my grandson, my children, but really, I just want to see that the district comes together and we're able to do what they want to do. The miners want to mine, the loggers want to log, the farmers want to farm. And that's what we want to do. We want to just stay in our area and not have to be just another number or another, passerby of, bringing, serving people in the restaurants and stuff. But the area has so much to offer. There's so much potential. I've seen this for years, and I have truly felt down to my core that we're in a boom. We're in a boom. This area can be what it used to be, and there's so much that the area has to offer. And I think it's wonderful that people want to live here, and they want to be able to raise their families here. And it's a whole new environment. And with the COVID, it actually surged it that people could live up here and work and go to school, which is great, which has also helped us get better broadband. Yes. And we need to continue on with that and bring other services to our area that are needed and not just bypassed.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. That's our time for tonight's forum in the Northland. I would like to thank the candidates Grant Hauschild and Andrea Zupancich for sharing their time tonight and for their dedication to public service. And for viewers, now that you've heard from the candidates, it is time to do your part. Get out and vote, either November 8th at the polls, in person at your local clerk's office, or by mail-in ballot. If you do vote by mail, make sure you have a witness sign your ballot and that you mail it in time to arrive by Election Day on November 8th, or it won't be counted. If you have missed any part of this program, you can watch it on our website, WDSE.org. For our guests and the team here at WDSE, I'm Heidi Holtan. Good night.